Hi, this is Steve Orr. I'm a reporter here at the Democrat and Chronicle. I'm here with my colleague Megan McDermott and Frank Sciremammano, a local engineer who is, I dare say, the primary expert in Rochester on the issue of Lake Ontario water levels. We've been writing a lot about that issue now. The lake is the highest it's been in almost a quarter century. There's some shoreline flooding and erosion already. There are fears it could get worse. So we're here to talk about that, and more importantly, take your questions and try and answer them on the issue of lake levels in Lake Ontario, and if anything can be done to lower them at this point. So let's please write in your questions. We'll address them as soon as we can. Let's start out by me asking Frank the basic one. Why is the lake so darn high right now?
Oh, the simple answer is we've had huge supplies, both into Lake Ontario directly, as well as downstream where the St. Lawrence River meets the Ottawa River. The Ottawa River has set records for the amount of rain that it has received and then the resulting outflow. So that restricts how much water can be let out of the lake, combined with the high supplies, has caused the lake to rise very rapidly over the month of April.
So now we've heard a lot and we've written a lot about this thing called Plan 2014. It's a new lake level plan, the first total new plan in 50 years or so. Went into effect in January, and boom, 3 months later, here we are with this near record water level. Frank, a lot of people think obviously it's 2014's fault. This new plan, which was designed to keep the water, allow the water to go a little higher than the old one, stay a little higher. Is Plan 2014 the issue right now?
Well, Plan 2014 is not the cause of the current high water. This would have happened under the old operation, plus or minus a few inches. Under the old operation, the board could have intervened to try and let out more water, but there was a very limited window when that could be done. The most that could probably have been getting off would have been an inch or two at best, and then the flooding downstream issue came into play. And so it's unlikely the board would have been able to do more than has been going on anyway with the flows that are built into the plan, at least up until this point.
So let me explain, by the way, this board. There's a board that has existed for many years, Canadian and American officials appointed to it, who essentially manage the lake level to the extent they can using the plan that is in place. Frank has been on that board for, what, more than 20 years now?
Since 1995.
He also was an appointed member of a special panel that was named to study and devise a new plan to regulate the water levels in Lake Ontario. That is the plan ultimately that came out of that, was 2014.
That's where I have to correct you. So there were three options that came out of the study, one of which was called the environmental plan, one was called the balance plan, one was called the economic plan, which maximized economic benefits. The board didn't make a recommendation on either of those, but it did recognize that the middle one was balanced. The IJC initially chose the balance report, but the environmental group said, no, that's not good enough. They then went behind closed doors with a government committee. They took the environmental plan and made it more radical. So while the basis came out of the study, the plan that is now in place did not come out of the study.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now that that plan is in place, is there anything that can be done? You know, basically the water has been getting higher and higher. You know, there's a lot of hue and cry from people who have businesses and homes on the lakeshore that, you know, something more has to be done. Isn't there anything that is possible at this point to try and reduce the water level, you know, more than it's being reduced now?
Well, first, until the lake hits what we call trigger levels, which are fairly high. In fact, we just hit yesterday, the first time we've hit the trigger level. The board does not have the authority to deviate from the plan. So as part of Plan 2014, IJC decided that the board would no longer have discretion in making changes to the flow. So we've been operating under the plan. But even if we had that discretion, I'll give you some statistics about what's going on downstream. Right now, as of yesterday, 319 main residences downstream are flooded. 437 main residences are isolated, meaning people can't get to their homes. and 147 roads are affected, closed or partially closed. So we are having problems here. They are also having problems downstream. And as long as those high flows persist in the Ottawa River, we really are limited in how much water can be let out. Now, as of yesterday, though, since the lake hit this milestone of 75.5 meters or 247.7, the flow was up to 8,700 cubic meters per second, and that is now raising the level to what we call the flood stage downstream. So something is being done. Whether it's enough to get the lake down at this point is probably not, but there's only so much capacity in the river that we can take advantage of.
And all indications are we're going to be getting more rain here over the next few days, and I think also sort of to our west.
East.
To our east also.
Yeah, so to the east is the more critical thing because that will hit directly in the Ottawa Basin and in the St. Lawrence River Valley. That will run off very quickly, raise their level again, which may mean we need to cut back the flow once again. Well, we need to, that the plan will cut back the flow again. So yes, the next weekend could be a problem. In addition, there's some talk about weather systems coming through which may whip up the lake in terms of waves. That's when we're going to have the real damage.
And that, you know, I mean, one point I wanted to bring up, and again, come with your questions, we're ready for you, is, you know, this has happened before. I know in the piece that we had in the paper today, we went back and looked at the levels. Really, there have been 7 times since they started keeping track on Lake Ontario that we could find where the lake had been to about this point or maybe a little higher. 3 times since they, and again, back up some background, in the 50s, culminating in 1960, they built a dam. The governments of Canada and the US agreed to build a dam across the St. Lawrence, which is what, and it has gates that can be opened or closed. That's what allow water to be held back or let out to a greater extent. So since the gates went in and the regulation began, I think there have been 3 other high water episodes like this, right?
Yeah, but 73, 93, and now we're at that point.
Yeah. And so it seems
And
like,
by the way, 73 was the board was still very new, and the regulation really only started in 1960. So they had very low water in the 60s, so they had that kind of experience. Once they hit 72 and 73, they really didn't have experience dealing with the high water. I think from that, there were some lessons learned. 93, it went up again, but since then, it's been fairly good. 98, we had a little peak. But I think the board learned to manage the system a little better over time.
so if the plan hadn't changed, if the old plan was still in use, the one that, you know, that you and other members of the board had, you know, decades of experience with, do you think that the situation now would be much different? I mean,
No.
we've heard from a lot of people just today
Sewer.
saying, oh, you know, they would have been able to do things to prepare for the high water in a way that they weren't able to do this year.
Right.
Is that, do you think there's?
I don't think that's true. I think, again, we'd be plus or minus an inch or 2. During January and February and into March, we had relatively warm, wet weather compared to the normal winter. And so during the winter, the system has to be managed for ice. So the ice would start to form. We have to cut the flow down because you want a nice stable ice cover so it doesn't break up and jam in the river. Cut the flow down, then all of a sudden it warmed up, the ice went away. Flow goes up. Starts again. There were at least 4 rounds of ice formation and then ice retreat. All during that time, the flow had to go up and down. And even if we didn't, by the way, at that point, have an indication we were going to be very high. It really was the end of March, and if you look at the water level tracking, last year was almost identical. We were very much the same at the end of March, and we had a big drought in June, and we were fine. This year, April, again, set a record on Lake Ontario for the supplies that came in. Those are uncontrolled. Lake Erie's outflow over the Niagara, as well as all the tributaries that come in. And again, record flows downstream, which limits how much water can be let out. So I don't think if the plan, even if we were under the old regime, the old plan, we'd probably be in the same place right now. The big difference will occur over the next month or 2, because Plan 2014 we will not be allowed to, unless we hit these extreme levels, these trigger levels, the board will not be allowed to let out additional water, even if there is capacity downstream.
No, I've gotten some tweets and some emails from people writing to say, well, if only Plan 2014 were not enacted, they could have invoked Criterion K and been able to let all this water out beginning in March, and that would have saved us all from this trouble. Is that the case?
Well, Criterion K read that if supplies exceed supplies of the past as adjusted. So that was a technical term, and we had a calculation for that. If that happened, it only happened in April. So we would not have been able to even ask for Criterion K until April. At the point where we would have asked for Criterion K, because the board couldn't do that automatically, we had to ask the IJC, and then they would come back to us and say, yes, invoke Criterion K with conditions. By the time we would have asked them for Criterion K authority, downstream was flooding. There was really not the ability to let out additional water without causing even more serious problems downstream.
Very good. Okay.
So the board was really at a point of trying to balance these two. Right now it's done automatically within the plan. We can argue whether the plan is good or bad if it shifts damages to the lake, but the board had really no say in it. That balance is now being done by the plan. As of yesterday, the trigger level has been hit, so the board is now intervening, and there may be some deviations. We're talking about that right now. But a lot will depend on what happens downstream. Again, they're having very serious flooding downstream. And we don't see the newscast, and because it's usually in French, we don't hear about it, but things are going on downstream that are quite serious also. Not to minimize our problems, because we do have high levels, we do have businesses that are being affected, we have homeowners that are being affected. Once the boating season starts in May, there's going to be even more economic consequences of this.
Well, how will these high water levels affect the boating?
Well, think about a 40-foot boat trying to tie up to a dock that's only an inch off the water level. You need a ladder to get up into it. Plus there's hidden obstructions on the water that now are going to be hidden that were not. In addition, all the boat launches, a lot of the fixed docks were all designed based on the old plan, which had a goal of maintaining the lake within a 4-foot range, 247.3 being the top. So when you were forced to design to that level, and now the water is 6 inches above that, all of a sudden your docks are underwater, you can't get boats launched, and so there are all kinds of infrastructure like that that were designed based on the old plan, which now are going to be affected by the high water. They're seeing it now in the Thousand Islands area. They were very strong supporters of Plan 2014, and now we're hearing, well, wait a minute, we can't, our docks are underwater, what are you doing to us?
So, hey, let me take a minute and welcome those of you who just joined us. I'm Steve Orr, reporter at the DNC. To my far left here is Megan McDermott, one of my colleagues, and sitting between us is Frank Sciremammano. He is an engineer, retired RIT professor, who lives in Brighton, who is a member of the board, a longtime member, who implements the plans that regulate the water levels in Lake Ontario, and also was involved in the study of lake levels that led to, indirectly, as he explained a minute ago, the creation of this new plan that so many people are unhappy with right now. So if you're just joining us, please send us your questions, post them here on our Facebook page. We would love to hear from you. Let me ask this, because this is something that I think people, maybe not those who are really in the middle of this, but the general public forgets. This discussion never takes place along the shores of Lake Erie or Lake Michigan or Lake Huron, right? The other three of the four other Great Lakes are not in any way.
No, there's a very similar discussion that occurs on Lakes Michigan, Huron, and Superior, because Lake Superior's outflow is controlled at the St. Mary's River. And after our study was done of Lake Ontario water levels, there was what's called the Upper Great Lakes study, which went for, I think, 5 years also, which looked at should there be changes in the way the St. Mary's outflows are managed. And I don't remember the exact results of that, but basically not large changes. And what they try and do there is Michigan Huron is basically one big lake because it's connected with a wide strait. So what they try and do is balance, again, the levels there, either below or above average, with the same thing on Lake Superior. So their operating plan kind of does that. And just like our plan kind of balances the flooding downstream and the flooding upstream when we have a flood situation, or on the low water end, the same thing. So the upper lakes, there is a large discussion of shoreline erosion, of flooding, of what the effect of the Corps of Engineers, any work they've done in the Detroit River is a very hot topic,
Right.
as well as the operation of the works on the St. Mary's River.
And so Erie, now is what they do in Superior, it would affect Lake Erie, but only
It would, but
much-
only marginally, yeah. But once it leaves Superior, Michigan Huron through the Detroit River and the St. Clair down to Lake Erie is completely uncontrolled. So that's just the natural flow of the river.
So it is true, right? All the lakes are high
Yes.
right now,
Yes.
which certainly doesn't help matters.
No, we
Here.
are, I mean, we're about 50 centimeters, a foot and a bit above 20 inches or so, above long-term average. But keep in mind, long-term average is just an average. It's not normal. I never like to use the term normal because, as someone once said, the average is what you go through from one extreme to the other. But it averages out. But we are well above what we would expect at this time of year.
All right. And again, it's really probably going to get more difficult for people living along the shorelines now.
It's likely that the water's going to keep going up for a bit. A lot will depend on the weather. And again, the trigger level through the spring keeps rising. So in mid-May, it's up over 248. So the board, again, will not be allowed to make any changes in the flow until it exceeds the trigger levels. So again, the 248 was deemed to be an acceptable level by the IJC in their decision making, and the board is not allowed to do anything to avoid that. If we go above that, the board will have some authority, but once we get below it again, it looks like that authority ends and we go back to the plan.
And we've talked a lot about being able to let water out through the dam and lower the level of the lake. Well, how quickly does that work anyway? I mean, how fast can we drain water out of the lake?
It's a very slow process. I can give you the exact numbers, but basically for every 300 cubic meters per second in additional flow, if we keep that up for a week, we can get an inch off the lake, or a centimeter off the lake, sorry, centimeter. Tied to that additional 300 will raise Montreal by 10 centimeters. It's a 1-to-10 type ratio. So it takes a while. It's a lot of water through a fairly small funnel, if you will. That doesn't mean it can't be done, and over a matter of 10 weeks, you can make a dent. But it's not a quick process, and that's why I've always advocated for preemptive actions.
Okay.
If we think we see something coming, let's take action now so there's a little room in there. But that's exactly the kind of thing that the IJC said was poor policy and have overruled it with Plan 2014.
That sort of pre-planning, that looking forward and
Yeah,
going.
because you miss the target a lot of times. You think
Right.
it's going to be high and it doesn't get high, and then you miss the high water. And the environmentalists have argued that high water and low water, those extremes, wetting and then drying out, are what they need for wetlands.
So do you agree that that's a...
I am dubious. As you may know, we've discussed this. I was involved right from the start. I've heard the arguments. I've read the reports. I'm not convinced. I think it's an experiment. I think we'll have to see if it works. They're doing a lot of data gathering now on wetlands and the effect of the water levels. So we should have a handle on whether this is actually working or not in a few years. What is not being tracked is the other side of the equation. That's the benefits of Plan 2014. The other side of the damages. And as far as I know, right now, no one is tabulating and keeping track of the damages that are resulting when the high water is there. Because that was the balance, that was the
Right.
trade-off. Let's get these environmental benefits. We'll have damages, but they're worth
Right.
it. And then we have to see in 2 or 3 years whether that's actually true or not.
And it looks like this year we're going to find out something about the price tag of those damages.
Well,
Well,
unless nobody's collecting the data, and then it's, in 2 years, they're going to say, well, that's just anecdotal. We don't have any real information. We can't rely on it. And that's what I'm very concerned about. Because in the past, whenever damages have been brought up, that's anecdotal. We can't count on it. It's not scientific.
And I know that has come up already. This year, I did a story in March after there was the water was not yet astronomically high as it is now, but we had those big storms in March. There was a lot of erosion, some fairly dramatic instances of that, and the shoreline people started screaming. Then we've got a lot of damage. Who's adding it up?
Right.
And I did talk to the IJC and others, and they said, well, it's kind of anecdotal. There needs to be a formal way to measure damage. It's just not clear, as you say, that anything like that has begun.
Well, it's clear it has not begun.
Yeah.
That's very clear.
And who should do it? The state or the IJC? Is it clear on that score?
Well, I think that the IJC is counting on New York State. Remember, New York State bought into this. They approved this plan. They basically said these levels are acceptable. And if you recall, one of the tenets of the study board was that if any plans result in damages, that there will be compensation and mitigation in place before the plan is adopted. Well, the IJC again ignored that recommendation, adopted the plan and said, well, mitigation, compensation is somebody else's business, let them do it. I think the DEC, maybe Department of State, were tasked with that, and they've done nothing.
Now, along those lines, I do have a question from a reader who's asking about the hazardous weather outlook for early next week that's calling for the high winds coming in off of the water, and how should that or will that affect lakefront property?
Well, that's when the real damage will occur. That's when we'll see water overtopping the break walls and spraying on the buildings and really backing up the channels. That's the kind of thing that causes the damage. Part of the problem with Plan 2014 is not so much how high the water eventually gets.
Right.
It's just that the frequency and the duration of the high water opens up the window for a storm to hit. If you only have a week of high water, you have much less probability of a storm happening then than if you have 4 weeks of high water or 6 weeks.
Right.
So this is exactly the scenario that's anticipated to cause a large amount of damage.
And I should add, I talked to the Weather Service about this yesterday. What's unclear is the wind direction. The worst wind direction for people around here would be, say, northwest winds.
Or northeast.
Or northeast, which would push the water toward the south shore where we are. At present, they're not forecasting northwest or northeast winds. But they cautioned me that we're going to have to check back, say, over the weekend when they get a better handle on the exact track of this rather dramatic low pressure system that's coming through. So, it could be bad or it could be maybe really bad, sort of depending on where the winds line up.
Or not so bad. If it's a strong wind out of the south, then
that's true.
We will have dodged the bullet.
Yeah, let me, for those who are just tuning in, let you know who's who. Yes. Megan McDermott, I'm Steve Orr from the DNC. This is Frank Sciremammano. He is a local engineer who is on the member of the, I'm going to get the name wrong, the International St. Lawrence.
International Lake Ontario St. Lawrence River Board.
Which is the entity appointed indirectly by the two governments that border the lake, that implements the plan, that regulates the lake levels on
Let me correct you on that. So formally what we do is manage the outflows.
Manage the outflows.
Okay.
So
with consequent effects on water levels, if you will.
And the outflows are from the dam that exists on the St. Lawrence and acts as a stopper in the river into which the lake flows. So essentially all the water from Lake Ontario goes through the dam and
on its way out to the ocean.
Exactly.
Someday,
heads
yes,
there.
to the ocean.
Very good. I know I have another reader saying too that the environmentalists had been pushing this plan. So you said before that taking the environment into consideration was really an important part of Plan 2014 as it came out, but not necessarily a part of what the group that you had been part of had recommended.
Well, we did take the environment very seriously, and in fact, even the balanced plan would have resulted, according to their modeling, again, there's a lot of caveats, how did you model it? According to their modeling, it would have improved the wetlands and the environment by like 37%. I mean, it's a hard number to nail down. But again, the environmentalists said at that point, that's not good enough. We want all or nothing. And so they went behind closed doors, and they came up with this new version, which is much more radical in terms of the environmental benefits, and it also shifts the balance of damages to Lake Ontario. As part of the adoption of Plan 2014, Quebec, as a province, said we will accept no less protection for our citizens than we have under the current operation. And so then all the damages were shifted to Lake Ontario, which is the only place that has admittedly in their own calculations, the IJC has shown there will be damages. Lake Ontario and the upper river in both recreational boating and in terms of high water, that's the only place where the damages will occur.
So when it comes to Plan 2014, that's a feature, not a bug.
That's right. That was intention.
So now
That was a choice. Let's say, you know, these are hard decisions. These people were appointed to the IJC to make the hard decisions. This is what they decided.
So now the obvious question, and which we've certainly heard a lot, is okay, well, change the plan. Let's get rid of it. Let's go back to the old one. Let's modify the new one. That is not so easily done, as we mentioned in the story today. Those who call for the plan to be simply rescinded and to go back to the old plan, 1958D or DD or whatever it was, that could only be done if the International Joint Commission agreed, and by rule it would require commissioners from both nations to agree.
It goes beyond that because the way it's written, they have to go to the governments again. United States government, Canadian government, presumably the provinces and the state also, to get their concurrence with any changes. So the way it's been written and the way it was approved in December, the change can only occur with the concurrence of the governments.
And there have been, politicians from upstate New York, Chris Collins, the most conspicuous, the congressman from Buffalo area, who have gone to the White House and the State Department, which sort of oversees this process for the federal government, to ask for either changes or to have the plan withdrawn. So far, in the public comment that we've gotten from Washington, there's been no expression of interest in doing that. Similarly, we have a comment from the Canadian government in which they expressed no interest in withdrawing the plan. Now that could change. Certainly, at least there's still meetings going on and still letters being written to the White House trying to get President Trump's attention. Who knows if that, could happen. But there is a process short of withdrawing the plan to amend it, correct?
That's right. There's something called adaptive management, which is built in, so that you don't have to wait 50 years and have a large study and act of the governments to make changes. And that's called adaptive management. The idea is to measure the effects of the operations and then make adjustments in the future if they are deemed necessary or desirable. And so that's why I keep talking about let's start compiling the information we need to make that decision in 2 or 3 years. We're going to have a lot of information about the environment. We're spending a lot of time and a lot of money monitoring the environment. We're spending nothing on the other side of the ledger. The benefit is the environment, the other side is the damages. We're spending nothing, we're doing nothing to monitor the damages, to document the damages, to have a scientific method so that we can have confidence in those numbers, so that 2 or 3 years down the line, if it shows that the benefits aren't really that good and the damages are very high, a change could be made.
And again, I think you said a minute ago, perhaps that's a function, that's something that the state should undertake or could undertake.
It could undertake, someone needs to undertake, let's put it that way.
And again, I have a couple other people asking more questions about, isn't there any concern about the damages
Of course.
that's going to be coming up if it floods into Sodas Point and the sewage begins to go into the lake, or all the beachfront properties and businesses.
All the consequences that were pointed out to the IJC during their deliberations. They knew about the sewers in Sodas Point. They were actually there. They visited Sodas Point. This is the decision that they made, and now we're seeing consequences of it, but I think they should have been foreseen. They were foreseen.
But bringing that back again, the levels in the lake right now aren't necessarily a direct effect of Plan 2014.
That's right. Right now, it's likely we'd be in the same boat under the old plan. It's going forward. It's, will this high water continue through July? That's the real question. Will we hit the trigger levels, 248 and above in May, that would allow the board to do additional changes to the plan flow? Otherwise, the plan flow itself will ramp up.
Okay.
I mean, we're up to 8,700 right now. The record flow for April out of the lake was 92 something, and I believe that was back in 93. And so, you know, we're fairly high on the outflow. The plan is adjusting to that. Whether the board could do more once there's room downstream is the question, and whether we'll be allowed to is the question. But otherwise, Plan 2014 is intended to keep the water high when it wants to be high and not do anything extraordinary to get it down. So that's, to me, the real problem.
Well, very good. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it. Again, this is Frank Sciremammano and my colleague Steve Orr. I'm Megan McDermott, and thank everyone for joining us today on the DNC. If you want to read more about the lake levels, you can visit democratandchronicle.com.